I did an article, I think it might have really been the first article on women in rock. And I remember how I started it, although I haven't got a copy of it or anything, but it was like, you walk into the venue and on the stage you see a person with long hair flailing around as they attack their guitar. You approach the stage and it's a woman!
Women in the music business in 1979 were just laughed at. Producers just thought, oh, women, they can't play, and there was no respect.
It was so boring all those years where there was only blokes in bands, also full of themselves. Boy, or should I say girl. I mean, the Spice Girls was sort of jokey mutation of it, made to cash money, cashing money on the idea of free-spirited females.
Fuck off, girl power my ass.
I hated school, and so I thought, what can I do? I went to art school. I got in when I was 16, a bit young, and I did 2 years at St Albans. So when I was about 17, it was Halloween, and it was great. We were all dressing up and so on, and this band gate crashed, and it turns out they were called the Sex Pistols. And we thought, well, the singer looks like a bit of a poser. He was wearing this sort of big mohair jumper, and he had his hair cut really badly. And as by coincidence, I had an accident with henna and peroxide, and so I had my sort of like day glow orange hair, like that orange on that dish. It's like this. My hair was literally like that, a bit like a rug, and I had to cut it off. So I had this dreadful haircut that I'd done, and they had the same haircut, so it was like a bit of synchronicity, and that was it. I just seemed to fit right in. I was wearing a pair of ice skating boots. I'd taken the skates off, and an old lady's salmon pink corset, and it wasn't meant to be sexy, it was just a joke, I didn't want to be sexy or anything, and sort of holy tights and a bit of a dustbin bag and 2 holsters with guns. So I sort of just fitted right in, and I remember John said, what's your name? He said, Johnny Rotten. I just laughed. I thought everything was funny. And they played really badly, like all these 60s songs. I'm Not Your Stepping Stone. And we just took the piss out of them. We thought they were a joke, Because this was around Halloween in 1975 at St Albans.
So after seeing the Slits' first show, I called them up the next day, and then we arranged to meet, and I brought my guitar round to some rehearsal place where they all were, but the guitarist wasn't there. I think she was away, actually. And I remember backcombing everyone's hair. We all backcombed our hair that day, like the New York Dolls, and we sort of looked like a band. Straight away we looked like a band, and I think we played one song together. I showed them my only one song, and together we kind of made it sound like something, and it was just instant musical gelling, and I hadn't had that with the Flowers of Romance. I hadn't had that with anyone else I'd played with.
I want to say something through lyrics, so I wrote Shoplifting, which I was very good at, by the way, and what else? Number One Enemy. Okay, that shows that anger there, I'm not gonna listen to you and carry knives and chains. Not that I really did, to be honest, and actually, no, I had a flag knife. That's not true.
Fairy Tale in the Supermarket, which was the first song we released, that with In Love with the first one of mine, but that wasn't one of the first ones I wrote. I wrote that after I watched a program about polystyrene and X-ray specs. And I kind of thought there was something that was said about the program, or it was because of the program, the whole thing. It was about her writing. I felt that her songs were like fairy tales in supermarkets, because they were a bit fairy tale-y, but it was all to do with consumerism and kind of everyday life. And I just thought, oh, they're fairy tales in the supermarket, and I just wrote that song.
So 3 things happened really to bring me into the Slits. The first was seeing the Sex Pistols, their first gig at Chelsea Art School. Actually, the second was hearing Horses by Patti Smith. I was waiting for the day that came into the record shops. In fact, when I got to HMV, who should be there that morning waiting for the Patti Smith record was Mick Jones. This is before we were going out. I think that probably sealed our relationship as well. And we went in, we both bought Horses by Patti Smith, came home, put it on, and my God, I've been waiting all my life to hear this sound. Why haven't I heard this before? Why haven't I done this? And then the third incident was seeing the Slits in Harlesden.
I suppose we wanted to have lives that were different to our mothers, who were kind of housewives, and we didn't want to stay in Tooting for our whole lives and be secretaries.
Visually, the stimulus was seeing polystyrene on top of the pops, because I looked and there was somebody who looked like lots of my friends singing things about what we all used to joke about, popper beads, Woolworths. You would hear that sound of female voices making a different kind of sound. It wasn't a there, you know, it wasn't a calming down sort of I'm available for you. It sounded much more like this is what we want to say.
We're all girls, we're in a convent school, and my friend Maddie said, literally, I'm really bored, let's form a band. So we all looked at each other and we said, yeah, let's do it.
I was really taken by this girl who was at the time, I believe 15. Ari was 15. This Nora with her cashmere, like fluffy sweaters, pink and bright peroxide hair, you know, like, and she was the mom, older, much, you know, older than us. And there's this 15-year-old girl, and she's having a temper tantrum, throwing herself on the floor. F you, F this to the mother. And I'm like, I never seen anything like that. I mean, like, wow. And I'm thinking, okay, I have a little background on, you know, from seeing the one-on-oneers. I know to have a front person, you have to be not care about what, you know, like, and then putting it in terms of punk. Now I want to have a band. So I think she would be perfect to work with. I mean, how would I get to that? But I put the two together and I say, you know, you have someone that doesn't care, you know, that would be great as a front person. And I wanted to play the drums.
It started with wanting to be in a band more than wanting to play the drums.
I don't think really when I bought the bass, I really seriously thought I was going to end up in a band.
I started playing bass when I was still living in Devon and not much to do, and I wanted to learn something, and it was always the bass that I was most interested in.
My mum bought me a record player, an old Danzak record player for my birthday, which just, she opened the floodgate because we sort of did creative things with cardboard in those days. We made cardboard guitars, and we used to mime along to Beatles records and anything that was, you know, available at the time.
Oh, my dad, I managed to blag my parents into buying me an electric guitar, because I actually ended up joining this silly little group that used to go around all the social clubs and play cover versions. I was about 15, 16 at that time. Yeah, they were all a lot older than me, yeah, but they just wanted a girl in the band, you know.
I had an old Bush record player and a few albums, and I had a Toots and the Maytals album. And on this Toots and the Maytals album was the track Funky Kingston, and in the middle of Funky Kingston, the bass goes up really, really to the highest possible place. And it's quite exposed, so you can hear this really high do-do-do, do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do. And I thought, oh, that's it. I'm going to learn to play that. And I was like, duh, 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 duh. And I had no idea where these notes were. I mean, although I could sing it, I couldn't work it out for ages. There aren't very many notes in that, and they're all actually really quite close together. It took me forever to work it out. But once I cracked it, I saw that there was this pattern. It was a visual pattern.
I was down in Captain Sensible of the Damned. I was in his place in Croydon, in his parents' house, because he used to live with his parents. He was making the demo for Chrissy Hind, and his back room, and the drums were on suitcase, somebody playing suitcase. And he got us on to do, we were doing screaming on the first demo of Precious, I remember. And Fred was there, who played in Johnny Moped Band. We went to his house and he had a toy bass. So he said, oh, you can have that if you want. I said, well, how do you play it? And he said, you just go like that, that's all you do. It's easy. So that was my first bass lesson. And I grabbed the bass and I had to get the 68 bus all the way back into London from Croydon. And I was with Captain, that's right, and we stopped off in Soho Market at the record stall, this bass, and this band in suits were giving out flyers, and it was The Jam, and they were playing at Ronnie Scott's. So, all right, yeah, we'll come along, you know. So we went down to Ronnie Scott's, and we thought it was a bit weird because they were wearing Union Jack badges and dressed in nice suits and things, and very retro. And their sort of 60s music. Anyway, Bruce Foxton broke a bass string. So I ended up lending in my toy bass to finish the gig. And anyway, I went home and started practicing. So that was the story of my first bass guitar. It was probably about that big. And it's a reddy orange colour.
I started first playing drums when I was still at school, about 15. This was pre-punk, just pre-punk, and at that time I was really into like 1950s music, rock and roll, like Little Richard, Elvis, that kind of thing. And I had a friend at school, this boy who had like a miniature drum kit. It was properly made, but it was like a children's one, I think. And he showed me like just had the that and that was it. So
I remember one time we were just walking down the road and we could hear a band rehearsing. I think we just knocked on the door and said, can we play? I think we did a lot of saying, can we join it? Yeah, we went to see a band and we said, can we play too? We're a band, can we play your instruments? And then we got up and this guy went, get off my guitar.
I said I can play drums, and they said you can play drums.
I didn't think I'd ever be in a band, and then when you asked me, I got very excited.
Yeah. I don't think I don't think it took guts. I don't think any of us ever thought, oh, we're girls, this is going to be like a big thing to do.
I don't think that was an issue.
It wasn't an issue.
Like that. Paul Cook came in and needed some money. I said, well, you know, sell something. And he said, well, I've got a drum kit. So I said, well, I'll buy that off you, because I thought I'd give it to my brothers who were musicians. And I was living in a squat at the time with Kate from the Modettes, before the Modettes this was, and I set up the drums in the basement there and started playing them. And Paul used to come in and show me what to do. Steve would come and play guitar. Strummer was in the squat, he used to come and play guitar with me. So I learnt well, you know, but very quickly. And within about 3 months, Kate and I put a band together. We got Jane. She knew Jane from a previous thing. And then Jane brought in Ramona, so that was that.
I'd been teaching myself to play bass from deep dub reggae records, and wow, loved it. And then somebody, Richard Dudansky, came up and said, oh, you can play bass. I said, yeah, I think so. Never played with anybody before. So I went to rehearsal and they gave me a bass, and they had this song which the progression was do 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 do. So I went boo ba ba boo ba ba boo ba ba boo ba ba boo ba ba. And they looked at me, shocked. You can play. Well, yeah. Is that playing? Great.
So I'm starting to play the drums and they started yelling, you know, like screaming like there's no tomorrow. And I'm playing it like there's no tomorrow, but guess what happened? I hit the drum set and the drum set just flies away. So what do I have to do? I hit it, grab it, bring it back, hit it, grab it, bring it back. It was like an aerobic exercise. In the midst of it, then Ari starts yelling at me that it's offbeat. Well, I can't hear. I only hear like her yelling. I mean, I didn't know that there was a beat or we're supposed to have a beat or anything. I just take that she is like concentrating on a minor detail.
So I didn't realise that when you go 1, 2, 3, 4, you're counting in not only for people to all come in at the same time, but also you're counting the speed. I just thought that's something you shouted at the beginning of a song.
It's something with us. We would always say come the same way for ages.
So I was the counter. So I just used to go, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we'd all try and start at the same time. No thought to all starting at the same time, but we'd all 1, 2, 3, 4, and end, and then look round, and Palm Olive would probably be just finishing, and then someone else had a few more drinks, and that's what the tour was like.
I never learned to play my keyboard. I think Kath, or somebody who's slightly more musical, had stickers on it with notes on it, like C, A, D, whatever, little stickers on each of the keys. And we'd write songs and it would be like C, 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 A, D. And I played with one finger like that. And I couldn't really do kind of anything else. I can't to this day. I couldn't play a musical instrument. My life depended on it.
One of the key aspects of punk, as that's often associated with it, is the whole DIY aspect, do it yourself. And many, for example, Paul Simonon of the Clash had barely picked up a bass before he did his first gig. But in the case of the women around, it was even more so because most of us hadn't had access to instruments. It was so much more a boys' thing. We'd been more traditionally cooking or something like that. And so it was a bold move when, we picked up guitars and so on. And so we had even less background than them because they'd been probably mucking around since they were younger. So there was quite a lot of learning on the job, and partly because of that, some new approaches to the instruments.
The worst bit was walking into the music shop. They were scarily full of musos playing solos 100 notes a second. And so when I went into the shop, I didn't want to try the bass out. I just grabbed the cheapest one, said I'll take it, and ran off home with it. So fairly soon I dismantled the bass and sprayed it sparkly blue with some car spray paint that I bought in the local DIY shop.
The thing about the Transcendent 2000 synthesizer was you had to send away for it, and it came in a big box in pieces and then it had to be assembled. And it's funny, people laughed a bit at the time, but they're actually collector's items now. I wish I'd kept mine.
We had no money, so we had at that point got a rather large bass amp because we'd adopted a bass player called Scylla at that point, who was a bit odd, and so we got this amp that we used to store in our flat, and it was quite a big kind of bass cabinet, and we used to carry it on, I think, the 53 bus from Gorton.
Heard about a rehearsal studio in Croydon, and again we had to walk miles with our equipment and take it on the 68 bus. They had the luggage compartment under the stairs, so we'd have to stuff it in there, then sit for like an hour or so on this bus going right the way through London from, Highbury. And I think we even had to change buses to get the 68 from Camden. It went all the way. We do crazy things like that. I knew Marco, who did the Banshees' first gig on guitar, later in Adamant. And he said, we've got a place in Rotherhithe. So one day we took all our gear to Rotherhithe and he was nowhere to be seen, just that was the sort of thing that used to happen. And we thought it was very exciting to go to a real rehearsal studio. But because nobody had any telephones, you didn't really know what was going on. You just had to rely on people turning up.
We only had one amplifier, which was some kind of little practice amp. A WEM, kind of cheap WEM practice amp, and I think we both used to plug in the keyboards and her electric guitar through it. She had an electric guitar.
We didn't have transport at the time. We went down, when we did our first gig, we had a couple of shopping trolleys, and we got our parents to help us, and we wheeled our equipment along the pavement down to the local youth club.
We weren't in the bedsit, sort of hitting cardboard boxes and just and playing our instruments sort of acoustically, so to speak. We had the great privilege of using APF's room in Blair Street, which is in Edinburgh, centre of Edinburgh, and was where they were excavating all the old caverns and storage rooms underneath the Royal Mile. and it was really very basic, because I mean the place was just like streaming with water, and it was just cobbled together with bits of planks over holes, and then strung with sort of a sort of very electric cable that was everywhere, that you had to avoid with this sort of dull lighting. And each room had a sort of makeshift door with like big padlocks on them, and they were the practice rooms. I mean, a very uneven ground and everything on them, and just all very earthy and wet. And it was a very unhealthy environment, really, because we're playing, with electricity, with our plugged-in instruments, and it was all a lot of water and puddles and things. But it was just an amazing place, because up on street level you couldn't hear anything, and then when you went in and down and started going down into the rooms below, there was this cacophony of sound of all the Edinburgh bands, and they weren't only punk ones, there was heavy metal ones, there was all sorts, all just coming in and out round the corners of this deep, dark, really quite scary place. And I think that's something that will always remain with me, just the damp smell, the earthy smell, and also the part of history. I mean, it was just so ancient down there, and it was just all being discovered at that time.
It was an old kitchen. It was strange because it had an oven and a toilet. The toilet was right next to the oven. And then we put all these mattresses around the walls, and of course the house was really kind of falling down. It was that house where, people would knock on the door saying, "I'm making a post-Holocaust film, can we shoot in your house?" So the house was really tumbled down. And there were, we made a hell of a racket. And there were people living really close all around. I'm absolutely amazed that we didn't get more objections. But we did, and we rehearsed for hours, and in fact we learnt to play by rehearsing together. We didn't really rehearse on our own. We didn't really learn on our own. We learnt together. So it was almost like we wove a kind of tapestry together. And it's funny because we rehearsed so bloody much. And one time we did this interview with the press, and they said, the Raincoats say they rehearse, as if to say, but you can't tell.
They just had a little shed at the bottom of the garden, and we're talking about, I don't know, 8 foot by 4, I'm guessing. I mean, it was minute, so drums, guitar and bass, like this. And but that worked out fine. And then we moved on to the local pub, and they had a pigeon hut at the bottom of their garden. And it literally, it was full of pigeons, and sometimes it was empty, but you had pigeon poo everywhere. And so we rehearsed down there. Sometimes it would be in the house, but we had a few complaints from the neighbours.
All the other bands around could play, so we did feel a bit self-conscious that we...
Yeah, but they're actually very kind to us at first, weren't they?
Yeah.
They lent us stuff, showed us stuff.
And then we
let us rehearse in their places.
Really, really hard, didn't we?
We did.
To learn to play our instruments.
It wasn't a focus of ours. I've got to be really good at this instrument. We wanted to write good songs.
Yeah. So we could play enough to.
It was about the songs. Yeah.
So we were still at school, so we basically would do our homework, and then at about 7:30, we'd, about 3 times a week, we'd rehearse in the front room, and we'd record ourselves on this little tinny tape recorder. So we'd rehearse, and we'd probably rehearse for maybe about 2 hours, and then we'd stop and we'd have Marmite sandwiches, and we would listen back to what we'd been playing, and sometimes laugh at it. Budgie was a big hero. He was a great drummer. Well, he's a great drummer, and Bruce Smith is, I think, the best drummer ever. So I was listening to a lot of pop group, Gang of Four, all that kind of edgy, offbeat stuff, that's the kind of thing I wanted to play. The B-52s, and the great thing about the B-52s was they had a synthesizer and keyboards and mad keyboard sounds, and I'd listen to Planet Claire over and over and over again.
I did have a big phase on Bob Marley, and I used to love playing it at home, but my parents' house was kind of quite cheaply built, and they used to complain because the bass would make my bedroom door vibrate in a really weird way. And in fact, sometimes I even got feedback coming through because I had massive speakers and it was such a tiny room that right next to my record deck, so you would actually get feedback going between the two, and the cumulative effect of reggae and a nice stereo system in a tiny single bedroom just about drove my parents up the wall. One of my first influences was my mum, because she had a fantastic radiogram. Well, it was a big thing like this on legs with a really, mono bass, fantastic. And she had a great record collection, and she'd have big parties probably in the 1960s where they'd take all the furniture out in the garden, and just everyone even the policemen dancing and came round to complain. It was fantastic in those days. And I'd sleep on the sofa in the garden, but I'd hear all the musical. That was an adventure in a cardboard box. But I'd hear the bass, and I don't know. That was just such a great time.
Yeah, my mum was a role model to me, and my dad actually. Funny enough, they were both musicians. We spent all our lives sitting in pubs and working men's clubs because my mum was a singer. She never made it pro. She wanted to, but women in those days, if you had a family and your husband was away working and stuff, you didn't get to do that. You didn't have that choice. You didn't get that support. And we didn't ever make a big thing of it between us, me and Mum, but I know she was really proud that I'd done it, and she was so proud that I was out there being a singer and a drummer.
They had this car park just next to the corn exchange. You could stand at the top. We saw quite a few bands that way.
Yeah, we went to hear the Undertones that way.
We went to hear the Undertones and then got in as everybody else was coming out.
Yeah, so we got to speak to them.
There were some racist punks, there was a lot of violence and all of that kind of thing, but it was worth the risk of fighting through that particular forest just to get to the prize of freedom, of doing what you wanted and expressing what you wanted to express the way you wanted to express it very loudly.
Ways in which it was difficult. I think in the late 70s it was very tribal. Skinheads seemed to really dislike us. They seemed to be personally affronted by us. And I can remember a few occasions where we were chased down the road and they threw punches. They never had any qualms about hitting girls. I mean, it was just like fair play. You look weird, so we're just going to hit you. But I remember one really frightening time. We played at a pub in Kingston, and we drove all the way up. We were really excited. We went in a van and we were so excited. It's our first London gig, da-di-da-di-da. And then we walked in the venue and it was full of skinheads. So we thought, oh no. And we got on stage and when things just go from bad to worse, and because the vibe was so intimidating, we started out of tune and we carried on out of tune, and it just got worse and worse, and I just couldn't find. And I was thinking, and our lead singer was going even more and more out of tune, and we weren't playing with each other. And so suddenly these bottles started hitting the stage, and then a few more bottles, and they're like, get off, fuck off. And, so we had to wind that gig up quite quickly, and then afterwards the promoters just said, well, I'm not paying you because you were shit, or something like that. And then afterwards we walked out of the venue and we were going round to the van, and we had a few guys with us they were our roadies who were helping us. And then suddenly about 50 skinheads came charging round the corner, just yelling and shouting at the tops of their voices. And they started beating up everybody, Some of us kind of got into the van for safety. So we were in the van, and then they surrounded the van and they were pushing it and trying to rock it over, turn it on its side. And they only stopped when a police car came along. I mean, it was in near a block of flats. So someone obviously called the police, and then they all just ran.
There was a gig we did at Birmingham Town Hall where the Angelic Upstarts were meant to play, and the UB40 and us were on the bill, but the Angelic Upstarts didn't turn up, and the whole audience was just skinheads. And when we went on, we just got everything thrown at us, bins, gobbing, was awful. And I just like went to the front and was like, you missed. It was really, yeah, but it was quite frightening.
And the NF turned up, the National Front, and they caused a lot of trouble. And I remember when everybody went away, they'd sprayed NF on the floor of the transport halls, and of course the people that hired it out were not happy at all. And I remember the promoter, who was just, a bloke that just wanted to put on a nice local gig, and get the bands playing. I mean, he ended up sort of having to pay that off for a long, long time.
We used to get a lot of mods turn up, which was fine, you get an audience. And then, of course, you'd get the Skins turn up, and the Skins caused a lot of problems. So what we did was we got one punk roadie and one skinhead roadie, and they both stood on the stage, so we had it covered.
You might get beaten up, there's lots of stuff. I got attacked by teddy girls, I had to talk my way out of things. And constant crap like that going on.
It was one gig and somebody threw water at me, or beer, a bottle. It was a bottle of beer, but I can't remember if it was full or empty, but I just felt this kind of danger thing. Sometimes when you're playing to an audience and somebody does something, you kind of feel that it's the whole audience, although that's totally wrong and that's totally unreal. It's that one person, but you just feel that it's the whole audience. And I just must have felt, what am I doing here? If they want to throw things at me, then why should I be playing here? And I just walked off stage. And I suppose I just felt that it was thrown at me, somebody hates me.
There was one point where Gary Bushell, do you remember him? He wanted to get us in with the Oi music because it was kind of similar. And he basically wanted like a female Oi band. And we done one interview with him, and he just kept pushing it, and I was just really wanted to get away from that side of it. So that was quite difficult, which I didn't want to be in with that lot.
I did get a pair of vinyl trousers from Saks, which turned out to be very practical because you could just wipe the gob off. The music press made it quite difficult because they just picked on me because I was female and extra criticism and sexist remarks, and people in other bands were fine, and the audiences, it was the journalists, strangely. I think it was just the drummer that really resented the attention I was getting, which I didn't like it either, so it made it really difficult. He would get cross if my picture was in a newspaper article or something. And whenever we did Top of the Pops, they'd give me my own dressing room, probably being at a different sex, they just ripped it off.
All around us, there was this kind of pervasive thing of, are you sure? Are you serious? Women aren't supposed to be doing this, and you're a bit shit, and all this kind of thing. And in a way, I had that anxiety about myself. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be doing it, and I wasn't sure I was any good. But at the same time, there was this feistiness. I had these two voices going in my head. You're crap. You got to do it. Crap. There's no way I'm not going to do it. So it was myself made it difficult. Society made it difficult, but also punk made it possible.
Afterwards, I got a really nice precision bass, and I remember there was a bass player in a band down at the youth club, and he said, "Oh, what's that fat bitch doing with that beautiful guitar?" And that was kind of the attitude.
For me doing gigs, I used to get laughed at quite a lot by the sound crew, the roadies, the sound men, like, who does she think she is? But so that's for me, I was very determined. I was going to play really hard and fast and keep it together, better than a man, I was going to, beyond that.
Did have the usual sort of get them off and shows your tits and all that sort of thing from time to time. That usually happened before we started performing, just when you were coming on, and then I think we just managed to blast them away with the sound.
I was doing my O-levels at the beginning, and we got a gig at the Corn Exchange supporting the Fall, and
random gig.
Yeah. And my mum and dad wouldn't let me out because I was supposed to be revising. So I said, I'm going to go and do some revision with some friends and I'll be back very soon. So we were first on, luckily, played. There was somebody there who interviewed us for the NME. So we did this quick interview, which he said it was the weirdest thing he'd ever seen. And then I ran home and my mum and dad had actually found out from Hester's mum. Yeah. I think that was the only time I got into trouble.
Then we signed to London Records. Oh, I hated it. We all hated it. It was horrible. You know, they just wanted the next Bananarama, basically. So we were always up against that image thing and how to sound, and they'd, you know, we'd go in and record something and we had that kind of edgy sound we wanted to keep hold of, but secretly they'd get another guitarist in and put another backing track on, and all that kind of stuff went on. And, you know, on the face of it, they were really supportive at first and always came to the gigs and like, you know, oh yeah, you know, take you out to dinner. But it was a load of shit. You know?
Dennis Bovell had produced Cut, the Slits album. Fantastic. We went in the studio with him, and London Records had us covering one of their numbers. All the music that we had, oh, they do a cover because they'd get the money for it. You know, businessmen. And Dennis Bovell did this incredible mix. He worked with us, he played with us. You know, I remember dropping in bass lines and it was fabulous. And then we did the dub cut. And he did so many, he kept doing it. And I kept saying, it's not good enough. Because I knew my dub. And I said, you can do better. And he did. And we had this single, which was wonderful. And London Records said, it's not commercial enough.
We had the first record label we were with.
Good Hit Records.
Well, it was Chrysalis first.
Good Hit Records.
Chrysalis.
In Cambridge. Good
What
Hit.
was
Do you remember
that?
Martin's? Good Hit Records. When we did our first demo, they signed us.
Did they?
Yeah. We never put a record out,
Right.
but we signed a contract. So I remember being in your kitchen, and you were too young to sign the contract, so your mum and dad had to sign it for you.
Oh, yeah.
We'd only been together, seriously as a band, a couple of weeks, and we knew fast product. Simon Best was part of the team, and he said he would make a demo for us because we wanted to send John Peel a demo. And so the way we did it in the drummer's living room of her house, of her parents, and Simon set up this tiny little mini studio, and he disappeared sort of wires all the way up the stairs, and I think he was sitting in Teen's parents' bathroom while we were in the living room, sort of trying to perform our songs in front of her mum and dad sitting in armchairs having a cup of tea with their little white terrier on their knees, you know, sort of smiling at us sweetly. And here we are singing, you know, this stimulation song and rape victim, and with quite a few sort of fucks and all sorts of cunts and whatever. And so took the tape about, took it down to Jeff Travis at Rough Trade, and I think Anne went to see John Peel and he wasn't in that day. So that was the end of that story.
We went to make the single, and it was an incredibly exciting time making the single. It fills me with butterflies just thinking about it, and so it was really profound to be listened to. And I think, you know, probably as a young woman I wasn't really expecting to be listened to, and suddenly I found that actually there were people who were interested in what we as a group had to say and what we thought and what we felt, and that was amazing.
You know, what a fantastic enclave for us Rough Trade really was. It did provide a kind of shelter for us.
You thought, finally, people are going to listen to what we think.
Do you know what Kath felt? I felt angry. I was furious, and my anger was very kind of unfocused. I didn't really know what I was angry about. I was just furious about everything. And the audience response was kind of not that interesting to me. I wasn't that interested by it.
I just loved the idea of just doing it and making a racket, you know, and putting our thoughts across expressing ourselves and fuck you, you know, we'll do it anyway.
I think that punk and the movements that punk engendered, like Rock Against Racism, Rock Against Sexism, provided us with a perfect platform to express all that anger, because there was an awful lot to be angry about, and the right medium to say it in the way we did.
You know, I wonder what they think to know, what people nowadays would think to know that there were all these bands that they wouldn't necessarily have heard of, because, you know, it was kind of a niche sort of thing, a lot of us.
Yeah.
For a lot of us. I mean, there were a few on Top of the Pops, but
hardly
many. Mm.